Okay, just imagine this for a second. Imagine a time when a simple idea, something you observed with your own eyes, could get you into serious trouble. A time when saying the Earth moves could literally get you locked up for life. Today, we're diving into the Renaissance. This was a period when brand new ideas didn't just show up, they had to fight for survival against centuries of tradition. And in doing so, they completely unlocked a new way of seeing the world. So let's get into it.
Our story kicks off right here, in the year 1633, with this guy, Galileo Galilei, on trial. Now take a good look at this scene. This isn't just some man in a courtroom. This is an astronomer, a scientist, facing off against the most powerful institution of his time, the church. And why is he there? Because his discoveries, things he saw by just looking through a telescope, challenged everything people thought they knew about their place in the universe.
So after being forced to publicly take back everything he'd discovered, legend has it that Galileo whispered these incredibly defiant words, "Eppur si muove," which means, but it still moves. He was talking about the Earth. Even with all that pressure, he couldn't just unsee the truth he'd observed. This one quiet whisper, man, it just perfectly captures the unstoppable spirit of this new age of discovery.
You see, this wasn't just a trial about one person. No. It was a massive showdown between two totally different ways of understanding how the universe works.
So the official charge against Galileo was heresy, which basically means going against official church doctrine. For more than 1,000 years, the accepted truth was that the Earth was the fixed, unmoving center of everything, and the sun and all the planets revolved around us. But Galileo's observations suggested the complete opposite, that the Earth was just another planet circling the sun. To the authorities, this wasn't some friendly scientific debate. It felt like a direct attack on their entire worldview.
So what gave people like Galileo the tools, and let's be honest, the courage, to challenge centuries of belief? It was a brand new way of thinking that was sweeping across Europe.
Okay, so before the Renaissance, if you wanted to learn about the world, you'd read ancient books. That was it. You just accepted what the old authorities said. But this new humanist thinking of the Renaissance said something completely different. It said, hey, don't just trust what's written down. Go out and see for yourself. Question things, observe, experiment.
This whole new approach eventually got a name, the scientific method. Now, it sounds simple, but this idea was absolutely revolutionary. It's a process for finding the truth, based not on what someone in charge tells you, but on actual evidence you can test for yourself. It meant knowledge wasn't just for the powerful anymore. Anyone could make a discovery.
So here's the breakdown of how it works. You start with a question, right? Like, does the Earth actually move? Then you gather information and you form a hypothesis, which is really just an educated guess. Then comes the most important part. You test it with experiments. You record what happens, you analyze the data, and finally, you draw a conclusion based only on the evidence. This step-by-step process could be repeated by anyone, and it became the engine that drove the entire scientific revolution.
All right, so let's see how this new method was used to tackle one of the biggest questions of all time. What is our place in the universe?
For 1,500 years, think about that, 15 centuries, everyone followed Ptolemy's model, Earth right in the middle. It just seemed like common sense. It doesn't feel like we're hurtling through space, does it? But then Copernicus came along, and based on his observations in math, he proposed this radical new idea. The sun is the center. This wasn't just a minor tweak, it was like getting a completely new cosmic address. And it wasn't just one person. Science is really a team sport, played across generations. Copernicus got the ball rolling, then Johannes Kepler used mathematics to prove that planets move in ovals or ellipses, not perfect circles like everyone thought. And finally, Galileo, with his powerful new telescope, actually saw moons orbiting Jupiter. That was the final piece of the puzzle. It was direct, visual proof that not everything in the sky revolved around the Earth.
The Renaissance didn't just look up at the stars. It also looked inward, with this new, intense curiosity about the human body itself. Okay, can you imagine going to the doctor with a cut and getting this as your prescription? I'm not making this up. This was a real treatment. It just goes to show you that before the Renaissance, medicine was this weird mix of superstition, tradition, and just pure guesswork. There was almost no real knowledge of how our bodies actually worked.
Now look at this. This is a drawing by Leonardo da Vinci. It's not based on superstition or guesswork, it's based on direct observation. He and other artists and scientists like him were using that new Renaissance mindset. They figured, if you really want to know how the body works, you've got to, look inside.
And then came this really crucial change. Dissection was finally legalized for study.
For the first time ever, scholars like Andreas Vesalius could publicly dissect human bodies and show his students how everything was actually connected. He created the first truly accurate books on anatomy, and with that, medicine finally started to change from superstition into a real science.
This new spirit of questioning everything wasn't just for science, it was also applied to one of the most fundamental human questions there is: how should we be governed?
Let's meet Isabella d'Este. She was a humanist ruler, and she really represented a new ideal for leadership. Guided by these humanist principles, she believed a ruler's main job was to act for the good of the people. She even made it a point to let her subjects speak to her directly, which was a totally radical idea compared to the distant, all-powerful kings and queens of the past.
But at the very same time, there was another thinker looking at politics with that same cold scientific eye that Galileo used for the stars. This was Niccolò Machiavelli. He wasn't really interested in how rulers should behave in some perfect world. No, he wanted to understand how they actually gained and kept power in the real, messy world. You could say he was the first true political scientist.
And this slide really gets right to the heart of the whole debate. On one side, you've got Isabella's humanist ideal. A ruler should be good and just and merciful. But on the other, you have Machiavelli's tough realism. To protect your state, sometimes you have to do things that are, well, none of those. It's a fundamental question about power that we are still arguing about today.
Machiavelli's advice was based on his pretty cynical view of human nature. He basically believed people were fundamentally self-interested, and a ruler had to deal with that reality, not just wishful thinking. Whether you agree with him or not, his willingness to analyze politics without any illusions was something totally new.
So why does all of this, from Galileo's trial to Machiavelli's ideas, why does it still matter to us today? Well, because the great unlocking that started back in the Renaissance, it never really stopped.
If you take away just one thing from all this, let it be this. The most important legacy of the Renaissance wasn't one specific discovery. It was the shift in how people thought. It was a fundamental change from a world that valued tradition above all else to a world that values evidence, observation, and critical thinking. That is the foundation of our modern world.
And this conflict, it's still with us. Just look at this cartoon about genetically modified foods. On one side, you have scientists presenting evidence, and on the other, you have public fear and a distrust of something new. It's the same basic tension that put Galileo on trial, that struggle between new knowledge and old beliefs.
Which brings us to one last thought. The Renaissance taught us that what seems like obvious common sense, like the sun moving across the sky, can be completely wrong. It really forces us to ask ourselves, what ideas do we accept as common sense today that future generations might look back on and just wonder how we ever believed it? What great unlocking is waiting for us right around the corner?
All right, I want you to, just for a second, close your eyes and imagine this scene.
Okay.
The year is 1633. We're in Rome. The room it's hushed, heavy with velvet and stone, but the tension.
Oh, the tension is just screaming.
It is absolutely screaming. You're in a courtroom, and kneeling on this hard, cold floor is an old man. He's nearly 70 years old.
His knees are probably aching.
Oh, for sure. And he looks tired.
And this isn't just any old man, right? This is Galileo Galilei. He's arguably the most brilliant scientific mind of his entire generation. A total rock star of the intellectual world.
But right now, he does not look like a rock star. He looks small, because staring down at him are the cardinals of the Catholic Church.
The most powerful men in Europe.
And they are twisting his arm, metaphorically, of course, though the threat of actual pain is very, very real. They are forcing him to do something that just breaks his heart.
They're making him deny his life's work.
They want him to say, on the record, that the Earth does not move around the sun.
That the Earth is still and the sun goes around us, the old way.
And he knows the stakes. I mean, this isn't some debate club.
No. If he refuses, he knows exactly what's on the table. Torture. The rack.
Maybe even being burned alive for heresy.
So he breaks, he reads a prepared statement, admits he was wrong, he saves his life.
But then there's this amazing story. Historians argue if it's true, but it's just too good not to tell. As he's struggling back to his feet, he supposedly whispers something under his breath. But it still moves.
I love that so much. You can threaten the man, you can silence his voice, but you cannot silence the truth.
And that whisper, that's really the heartbeat of the whole era we're diving into today. It's the sound of this massive shift in human history.
We are taking a deep dive into the exchange of ideas. And we are on a very specific mission today. We want to frame this for a grade 8 audience.
So to all the teachers and students listening, this one's for you.
We are looking at basically the ultimate cage match of the Renaissance.
It really was a battle.
Yeah.
So in one corner, you've got old authority.
That's the idea that you believe something because a powerful person or an ancient book or a priest told you it's true.
And in the other corner, you have the challenger, new observation. This radical idea that you should actually prove things for yourself.
It's the moment humanity stopped asking who said so and started asking how do we know so.
So here's our roadmap. We're going to watch this battle play out in 3 big arenas. First, science and medicine, which involves some truly disgusting recipes, by the way.
Oh, I can't wait.
Then we'll look at leadership. We've got some pretty ruthless new ideas on how to rule that, honestly, you might recognize in modern politics.
Or even high school, frankly.
And finally, religion. We'll look at how a piece of technology, the printing press, let a German monk completely break the church's absolute power.
It's a great story.
So let's start where Galileo did, with the stars.
Okay, so to get why Galileo was in so much trouble, you have to understand the old view. For over 1,000 years, everyone, and I mean everyone, believed a theory from a Greek astronomer named Ptolemy.
And the church was a big fan of this theory.
They loved it. The idea was simple. God put the earth at the very center of the universe. Everything else, the sun, the moon, the planets, the stars, it all spins around us.
Which, when you think about it, gives humanity some serious main character energy.
It really does. It makes us the most important thing in all of creation. And honestly, it feels right, doesn't it? If you're a kid in the 1500s, you stand outside, the ground feels solid, and you watch the sun move across the sky.
Why would you ever question it?
Unless you're Nicholas Copernicus, or later Galileo.
Right.
These guys did something, well, dangerous. They didn't just read the old books. They looked up. Galileo got his hands on a telescope, which was a new invention, and he pointed it at the sky.
And he saw things that just shouldn't be there.
Exactly. Like what? Well, he saw moons orbiting Jupiter.
Whoa.
That was a huge problem for the old view because it meant not everything orbits the Earth. He saw Venus going through phases just like our moon, which only makes sense if it's orbiting the sun.
So the math and the observation, they just made it undeniable. The sun was the center.
But here's the really interesting part. Why did people freak out so much? I mean, why did the church care where a bunch of rocks were spinning? It seems like such a technical detail.
Yeah, what's the big deal?
It wasn't just about rocks. It was about order. It was about this whole idea of the great chain of being. If the earth isn't the center, well, maybe God didn't put us in the most important spot.
Maybe we're just on a random rock floating in space.
That's a full-blown existential crisis. It threatened the entire religious worldview. If the Bible was interpreted to say the sun rises and you come along and say, no, the earth turns, you aren't just doing science.
You're questioning the authority of the church to interpret reality itself.
So Galileo wasn't just checking the math. He was challenging the entire power structure. And he was doing it using this new tool, the scientific method.
This is the big takeaway for all the students listening. Before this, if you wanted to know why a rock falls, you'd go read Aristotle.
Right. But after this, you have thinkers like Leonardo da Vinci saying, we must consult experience.
And this is literally what you do in science class today.
It is. Identify a problem, gather info, form a hypothesis, experiment, analyze your data, conclusion.
It seems so standard to us now.
But in the 16th century, saying, I'm going to test this myself, instead of just, I believe the ancient wisdom was a revolutionary act.
And, nowhere was that revolution more necessary than in medicine. Because, let's be honest, old medicine was basically a horror movie.
It was distinct, yes.
I found this recipe in our source material for treating wounds, and I want everyone listening to really picture this. This is what you would do if you got cut. The prescription is, cook 10 green lizards in olive oil and filter them through linen.
Delicious? And then what?
And then I think you add some herbs, but just casually boiling 10 lizards to fix a cut.
That is a perfect example of the old way. It sounds like a witch's potion because, that's kind of what it was.
Yeah.
Doctors didn't understand anatomy. They almost never looked inside a human body. It was considered sinful or it was illegal to dissect humans. So they relied on things like astrology, literally checking your horoscope before deciding on a treatment.
You're kidding.
No. They used leeches for bloodletting because they had this idea of bad blood causing illness. It was all just guesswork and superstition.
So how did we get from lizard oil to, actual medicine?
We started looking under the hood. There was this professor at the University of Padua named Andreas Vesalius, and he decided that looking at drawings of dogs and monkeys just wasn't good enough to understand humans.
He wanted the real thing.
So he started performing public dissections on human bodies.
Which is gross, but very necessary.
Oh, totally. Imagine the scene. A steep wooden theater packed with students, probably smelling of preservatives or worse, and Vesalius is down there, cutting open a body, showing the muscles, the nerves, the actual organs.
He was fact-checking the ancient books with his own eyes.
Exactly. He wrote a book called On the Fabric of the Human Body. The drawings were incredibly detailed. He wasn't guessing, he was observing. He proved that men and women have the same number of ribs, which actually contradicted a popular belief based on the Adam and Eve story.
He was using his eyes, not his assumptions.
But as our sources point out, it's really worth noting that this wasn't the only kind of medical knowledge in the world.
That's a really important point.
Yeah, while Europe was busy boiling lizards, the source material highlights that First Nations peoples in North America had a very different approach.
They weren't cutting people open in lecture halls.
No, but they were observing. They focused on holistic health, mind, body, and spirit. And they had this deep, deep knowledge of plant wisdom. There's a Micmac saying, "For every sickness on this earth, there is a medicine under your feet."
That's a different kind of observation, isn't it? It's observing the natural ecosystem over centuries.
Precisely. It's knowing which root cures a fever, which moss stops bleeding. It's just as valid as the scientific method, but it came from a relationship with the land, not a dissection of it.
Okay, but back in Europe, this whole shift to the scientific method was creating a new kind of confidence. If we can understand the stars and the body by observing them, well, maybe we can understand power the same way.
Which brings us to our second battleground, leadership.
And the heavyweight champion here is a guy whose name has literally become an adjective, Niccolò Machiavelli.
The first true political scientist.
So before Machiavelli, books on leadership were, well, they were basically wishful thinking, right? Be nice, be noble, be a good Christian king.
Exactly. They were about how a leader should behave in a perfect world. Machiavelli looked around Italy, which was a complete war zone at the time, and said, "That's nice, but I'm going to watch how people actually behave."
And what he saw was not pretty.
No. In his famous book, The Prince, he just strips away all the morality. He argued that the state is a human creation, not a religious one, and because people are, well, in his words, ungrateful, fickle, liars, and deceivers, a leader just can't afford to be soft.
He had that famous animal analogy. A prince must be both a lion and a fox. Let's break that down for the students listening.
Okay, so the lion. Lion is about brute force. It scares off the wolves. If you're a leader, you need to be strong enough that people are afraid to mess with you.
But a lion isn't exactly subtle. A lion can just walk right into a trap.
Right, so you also need to be the fox. The fox is clever, the fox is tricky, the fox can spot the schemes and all the lies. Machiavelli said you need to be both. You can't just be one.
And this leads to his most controversial idea, the one that gets him in so much trouble. The end justifies the means.
People often misinterpret this as just do whatever you want, but Machiavelli was very specific. He meant that if the end goal is to keep the state safe and stable, then the leader is allowed to use any means necessary to achieve that.
Even if those means are, bad.
Yes. Lie, break promises, maybe even be cruel. If it saves the state from chaos, Machiavelli would say it is the right thing to do for a leader. He separated politics from personal ethics.
It's cold. It's efficient. But is it the only way? Because our sources give us this really great counterexample. A woman named Isabella d'Este.
Ah, the first lady of the world.
She was ruling in Mantua. Now, Machiavelli's all about fear. How did Isabella operate?
She was incredibly effective, but her tools were different. She was a woman in a man's world, ruling while her husband, the Duke, was off fighting wars. She couldn't just, beat people into submission.
So she used her brain.
She used what we call soft power. She was cultured, she was brilliant, she focused on stability through connection, she wrote thousands of letters to keep her network strong. She famously said she listened to her subjects so that no disturbance can happen without my knowledge.
So Machiavelli is the lion and the fox ruling through calculation and fear. Isabella is about culture, engagement, and intelligence gathering.
It raises a great question for a class discussion. Who's the stronger leader? The one who does whatever it takes to win, or the one who builds a culture where nobody wants to rebel in the first place?
I feel like Isabella would have been great at running a modern company. Or a very, very organized Discord server.
Absolutely.
Okay, hold that thought. We've done science, we've done politics. Now we have to tackle the biggest giant of them all, the one institution that touched every single person's life in the Renaissance.
This is the third arena, religion, the Catholic Church.
Right. We established that the church was the ultimate authority. If the Pope said it, it was true. But by the 1500s, regular people were getting fed up. It wasn't just theology, it was the cash flow.
Corruption was the main problem. You had priests literally buying their titles. You had popes like Alexander VI, who were basically running the church like a family business to make their own kids rich.
They were living like kings, not like monks.
And then you have the indulgences. Can we explain this in simple terms? Because to a modern ear, it just sounds wild.
So wild.
Okay, think of it like a microtransaction in a video game. You know, pay to win.
Yeah.
This was pay to get into heaven. You paid money to the church, and in exchange, you got a certificate and indulgence. And this piece of paper said that the time you, or even your dead relatives, would have to spend in purgatory being punished for sins was reduced.
So you could literally buy forgiveness.
Essentially. The church needed money to build St. Peter's Basilica in Rome, and this was their big fundraiser. But to a lot of faithful people, it just felt like a scam. It felt like they were selling God's grace.
Now, people tried to speak up. We have the story of Savonarola in Florence. This guy was intense.
Girolamo Savonarola.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. He was a monk who just despised all the corruption and luxury. He preached these fiery sermons in Florence. He actually convinced the people to build a massive bonfire of the vanities in the town square.
Which is such a cinematic image.
It really is. A huge pile of wigs, makeup, fancy clothes, art, mirrors, anything that distracted you from God, all of it just burning in the street.
But Savonarola failed.
Yeah.
Why?
Well, he lacked a platform. He criticized the Pope too loudly. He got on the nerves of the powerful. And eventually, he was excommunicated and executed. He was just a single voice. He couldn't scale his message.
But then, just 20 years later, along comes Martin Luther.
Another monk. But Luther had a massive advantage that Savonarola didn't.
So let's set the stage. Luther is a German monk. He's studying the Bible, and he realizes that nowhere in the actual text does it say you can buy your way into heaven. He believes faith alone saves you.
Right. So on October 31st, 1517, he takes action. He writes out the 95 Theses, basically a list of 95 arguments against indulgences, and he nails them to the church door in Wittenberg, Germany.
Now, usually this is where history class talks about theology. But let's talk about the tech. Why was this the viral tweet of the 16th century?
Because of the printing press.
This is the game changer.
The absolute game changer. Johannes Gutenberg had developed the movable type press around 1448. Before this, if you wanted a copy of Luther's complaints, a monk had to handwrite it on a piece of animal skin.
Which would take months and be incredibly expensive.
Exactly. Ideas moved at the speed of handwriting, but with the press. Luther's 95 Theses were printed and distributed all across Germany in weeks, across Europe in months.
It went viral.
It did, and Luther didn't stop there. He translated the entire Bible into German. Suddenly, regular people who couldn't read Latin, could read the Holy Book for themselves.
They didn't need the priest to be the gatekeeper of information anymore.
That is the new observation applied to religion. Read it yourself, decide for yourself.
And the church couldn't stop it. They tried banning his books. They created the Index of Prohibited Books. But it was way too late. The monopoly on information was completely broken.
And Luther stood his ground. He was called before the emperor. He refused to take it back. He famously said, "Here I stand, I can do no other."
And unlike Savonarola, Luther wasn't executed.
No, he was protected by German princes who had read his pamphlets and agreed with him. He started the Protestant Reformation, which split the church in two.
Though, to be fair, the Catholic Church did eventually clean up its act, didn't it?
They did. It's called the Counter-Reformation. They realized they were losing the PR war. They held the Council of Trent to fix the corruption and founded the Jesuits, the Black Robes, to focus on education and winning people back through learning. So the competition actually forced the church to get better.
It's just amazing how fast ideas could spread once that technology was there. But it wasn't just books moving around. The sources talk about a brain drain.
The spread of ideas was physical. You had the rise of universities, places like Padua, where Vesalius was cutting up bodies. Students traveled from all over Europe to learn there, and then they took those radical ideas back home with them.
And kings were basically headhunting talent. I read about Francis I of France.
Oh yeah, Francois Premier. He wanted that Renaissance cool factor. He invited Leonardo da Vinci to come live in France. Basically said, here's a castle, here's a salary, just come be a genius near me.
Nice gig if you can get it.
For sure. And it helped move the center of the Renaissance from Italy out to the rest of Europe.
Before we wrap up, I want to touch on one more way math and science changed how we see the world. Literally, in art.
Perspective. This fits perfectly with our theme of observation.
If you look at art from the Middle Ages, it looks, well, flat. The sizes are all wrong. Important people are huge. Unimportant people are tiny. It just doesn't look like real life.
But then you get Filippo Brunelleschi, he was an architect in Florence, and he used geometry to prove that you could create the illusion of 3D depth on a flat surface.
How did he prove it?
He did this famous experiment with a mirror and a painting of a building. He drilled a tiny hole in the painting, and then he looked through the back of the painting, through the hole, at a mirror that was reflecting the painting itself.
That sounds complicated.
It is, but the result was simple. He proved that if you use vanishing points in math, the painting looks exactly like the real building in the mirror.
So art wasn't just about making pretty pictures anymore. It was about accuracy.
Right. It allowed artists to show the world as it truly appears to the eye, just like the scientists were describing the body as it truly is. It's all connected. It's all about looking at the world and trying to understand how it actually works.
So let's bring all this together. We started with an old man kneeling in front of the cardinals, whispering, "It still moves." And we ended with a revolution in how we see everything, from the stars to our own blood cells.
The common thread through all of it, Galileo, Vesalius, Machiavelli, Luther, is that shift from accepting authority to trusting observation.
It's asking why, instead of just saying, "Yes, sir."
And crucially, it was fueled by the ability to share those questions. The printing press turned local complaints into international movements.
Which brings us to the big takeaway for today. Our source material makes a really interesting comparison here. The Renaissance was an information age. They had the printing press. We have the internet.
It is a perfect parallel. The printing press spread the truth like Luther's Bible or Galileo's findings, but it also spread conflict. It spread propaganda. It started wars because people were suddenly arguing about things they used to just accept.
And today, we have all the information in the world right in our pockets. But that includes the lizard oil recipes, right alongside the real science.
And that's the challenge. The Renaissance thinkers developed the scientific method and critical thinking to sift through all that noise. They had to learn how to verify, how to spot the difference between an astronomer and an astrologer.
So here's the thought we want to leave you with, especially the students. In a world of absolute info overload, where TikTok and YouTube can teach you anything, do we have the same critical thinking skills today that those Renaissance thinkers fought for?
Are we dissecting the information we get, or are we just buying the lizard oil because some influencer told us to?
That is something to chew on. Go check your sources, everyone. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.
A pleasure.
See you next time.